As David Bowie and Iman's romance started, the world was hooked. A rock legend and a supermodel, two ultra icons who appeared unattainable, but whose connection was painfully genuine. When Bowie passed away in 2016, Iman promised never to wed again, labeling him forever her husband. But now, after 22 years, their daughter has matured, and the world is left aghast at how she's changed. Who is this young lady, and how does she bear the mantle of two legends? Tune in, because her tale may leave you gasping. Long before she became one of the world's most recognizable supermodels, Iman's tale started in the middle of Somalia, where tradition, family, and toughness forged her spirit long before fame ever could. Born Zahra Muhammad Abdul Majid on July 25, 1955, in Mogadishu, her life was characterized from an early age by a feeling of singular existence and purpose. She was the first female born to 6 generations of males in her family, an achievement that made her immediately special. In a family of predominantly sons, Iman's birth seemed to be history restarting itself, as if her family intuitively knew she was meant to be different. Her father, Mohammed Abdul Majid, was a diplomat and even an ambassador for Somalia to Saudi Arabia. This is to say that Iman's upbringing was not only marked by family culture but also informed by an exposure to global politics and culture. Her mother, Marian, was a gynecologist, a smart woman in her own right who taught her daughter a lesson in independence and smartness. Having grown up in the presence of such powerful figures provided Iman with a solid background in discipline and education, attributes that would stand her in good stead when she emerged onto the world stage. Her grandfather named her Iman, which in Arabic means faith. He assumed that this name would be a guiding light, a blessing protecting her and guiding her to success in a world that tended to overlook women. In the years to come, Iman would reflect on this gift as one in which the power of her name became an integral part of who she was. What began as a blessing in disguise from her grandfather evolved into the confirmation she took with her into every room, every runway, and every camera lens. Iman's childhood, nonetheless, was not as glamorous. She grew up during her early years with her grandparents in Somalia, surrounded by tradition, integrating her life into the pride of her culture. She was enrolled in a boarding school in Egypt when she was 4 years old, an institution that broadened her experience even more. This was where Arabic, English, and Italian were spoken together. The schooling was varied too, extending beyond books. Lying abroad so young provided her with a feeling of independence and resilience, traits that would pay off big time in the turbulent years ahead. But as Somalia plunged into a period of political unrest, her father contemplated moving the family first back to Mogadishu and then to Kenya in search of greater stability. It provided a different outlook on the toughness and frailty of life in Africa. These were lessons that kept her grounded even when her destiny journeyed far away from home. At the time she reached the University of Nairobi, Iman was an assertive young girl with dreams of her own. She studied political science, reflective of her fascination with politics and her father's diplomatic background. Modeling at this point was nowhere in sight. It was all about American photographer Peter Beard, who spotted her on campus. The photographer was immediately enamored with her copper-colored skin, elegant build, and long neck, and Beard insisted she had a model look. Iman did not melt initially, though. In her own self-concept, she was not something beautiful but a serious student working towards goals with political roots. Beard was not deterred, however, and eventually, she consented to stand in front of the camera. This would change the path of her life completely. In one of those cycles, she would arrive in America, and within 1976, there would be a Vogue Globe with her on the cover. Iman was always unlike so many others, not just because of her amazing looks but because of the very resilience of her Somali origins. She strode with pride and reminded individuals in most of her interviews that the beauty that they were seeing was the normal Somali beauty and not anything artificial or exotic. This pride in culture was her charm, and she was educating the fashion world that elegance could, indeed, be celebrated and rooted in heritage. Fashion designers like Yves Saint Laurent, Gianni Versace, and Donna Karan cherished her presence not just as a model but also as an inspiration. Even before she was an inspiration to the designers, however, Iman was just a little girl from Somalia, her name, Iman, means faith, and her family thought she was born to do great things. Her early years were spent in Mogadishu, Cairo, and Nairobi, which instilled her with strength, resilience, and an identity that no fame could ever diminish. Iman's ascension from Somali student to international fashion icon was the prelude, but the man who would transform her life was still years in the future. If Iman's life was characterized by tradition and refinement, David Bowie's life was one of reinvention, rebellion, and infinite creativity. Born David Robert Jones, January 8, 1947, in Brixton, London, his journey to fame was far from straightforward. As a young man, Bowie was simply another would-be musician trying to make his mark. He played in local groups and attempted to make himself noticed in the thick music scene of the 1960s, but initial efforts were basically overlooked. Even his first album in 1967 didn't arouse much excitement. To some, it could have appeared like the end of an ill-fated dream. But Bowie was not a conventional performer, his ambition to reinvent himself would prove to be his biggest strength. The turning point arrived in 1969 with the release of Space Oddity. Based on the Apollo 11 moon landing, the chilling single described the life of fictional astronaut Major Tom and instantly dazzled listeners. The record rose through the UK charts and was the start of Bowie's rise to fame. But Bowie never wanted to repeat success. Each hit, as far as he was concerned, was not a culmination but rather a stepping stone towards a future creative identity. His agitation led to one of his most renowned alter egos, Ziggy Stardust. In 1972, Bowie presented the world with the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Ziggy transformed into more than a role, with his flashy attire, androgynous appearance, and unapologetic stage presence, he was a cultural revolution. Starman and Suffragette City were not just hits, they were anthems for misfits, dreamers, and anyone ever out of place. Bowie's fluidity of identity and norm-smashing opened up a path to heroism for all those who had discovered themselves on the margins of society. For Bowie, however, he should never be limited to an idea, although one of the most monumental representations, Ziggy. But in the mid-70s, he discarded all the glitter and embarked on what he referred to as plastic soul. The collaborative effort with John Lennon in 1975 went on to dominate the Billboard in America and reminded naysayers of all types, British or otherwise, that Bowie could make it anywhere. His album Young Americans proved how easily he could blend funk soul and rock into something fresh. Critics might have detested that he could never survive in his various photographs, but the people adored him for his bravery. And that same temper changed into the form of a career as an actor also. The 1976 science fiction film The Man Who Fell to Earth, featuring Bowie, made him known not only as a musician but also as an actual performer and narrator. Soon after, he released his iconic Berlin trilogy, Low, 1977, Heroes, 1977, and Lodger, 1979, with producer Brian Eno. These profoundly experimental electronic-oriented records opened new boundaries for rock and would inform countless generations of musicians to follow. Heroes specifically was one of Bowie's top classic tracks, praised because of its raw and unbridled passion and rebellion. Since the 1980s, Bowie had transformed into a global pop sensation. His 1983 album Let's Dance was a global success story, from which spring forth such hits as Modern Love and China Girl. The album's dancing beat propelled Bowie to arenas and disco halls across the globe, familiarizing him with a whole new audience. He was no cult icon anymore but in the constellation of the masses. And yet, he never gave up his art. Throughout each decade thereafter, Bowie was ever the iconoclast, whether it was through his group Tin Machine towards the end of the 1980s, the creation of additional electronic albums during the 1990s, or his widely acclaimed later work, Blackstar, released only 2 days before his death in 2016. But beneath the glamour and stardom, Bowie was looking for something he could not find in his work only, until one serendipitous encounter. By the end of the 1980s, David Bowie was a global superstar. He had conquered music, cinema, and fashion, yet behind the dazzling performances was a man who still longed for companionship. Friends often described him as warm and witty, but also quietly lonely. Despite his fame, Bowie wanted what every human being seeks, a partner who could see beyond the fame, the personas, and the music. That's when fate intervened in the most unexpected way. Teddy Antolin, Bowie's longtime hair stylist and friend, had observed firsthand this isolation. He knew Bowie required a presence who could temper his intensity with elegance. At a party in Los Angeles, Teddy encountered the woman he felt was ideal for him, Iman. A supermodel recognized globally, she was not only stunning but also perceptive, practical, and kind. Teddy resolved to try to set them up. Although Bowie was stationed in New York and Iman resided in Los Angeles, Teddy invited both of them to his birthday feast, hoping things would ignite. What happened that night was sheer magic. It was a night straight from a Hollywood blockbuster, their initial encounter. It began when Bowie rolled up in a white Mustang, dressed in spotless white denim. Seconds later, a black Mercedes pulled up outside the door with Iman wearing an all-black leather outfit that stole the show. Teddy himself would remember the atmosphere had changed itself. Bowie was not able to look away from her. There were hours spent talking by the two of them, with Iman being guarded and Bowie believing differently. It was love unfeigned for him at first glance. In subsequent interviews, Bowie confessed not being able to sleep after that, his mind being set ablaze by visions of her. It took time for Iman. Having experienced the sour fruits of high-profile relationships, she had both ends of this stick. Charm would not be enough to see this through once the real thing began. Though Bowie was charming and handsome, she was curious to know if there were more to the rock star image. Bowie, though, was not about to let her get away. His pursuit was not showy or superficial, instead, it was gentle, tenacious, and completely genuine. Iman flew to Paris shortly after they had met, and shortly thereafter Bowie started sending her flowers every day to her hotel. Every bouquet contained not just loveliness but purpose. This was demonstrating to her that his emotions were not ephemeral. When Iman returned, Bowie surprised her at the airport and patiently waited for her to arrive. For Iman, these were so deep. She later said that Bowie properly wooed her in a way no other man had. It was not for public display for the press, it was for consideration, patience, and being present. The two tipped into a very pale romance. On one of those extremely few occasions, he explained to friends under his promise that it was with this lady that he could wager his money. Years after, to interviewers, he explained, "I'd never pursued anything in my life with as much ardor, I just knew she was it." The belief was solid. Slowly, Iman began to feel it too. After a while, she knew she was not falling for rock icon David Bowie, she was falling for David Jones, the human behind the image. Bowie proposed to Iman twice. The first time she said no. For Iman, marriage was not only between two individuals, it was where families, cultures, and beliefs were brought together. She had wished Bowie to get to know her family and realize the complete essence of being her husband. Bowie, being a gentleman, did not insist. He waited, listened, and confirmed her loyalty to him by his own devotion to her. Later on, Bowie asked again, this time on a yacht in the Adriatic Sea, when he presented Iman with a rare 15-carat star sapphire ring that he had been on the lookout for months. Iman agreed.